Cool, guys. It's 8:30, so I'm probably going to start rolling. Start talking about our objectives for the week. So obviously, this is a pretty important week in our journey today, right? In the words of Titus, you earn your naval aviator mustaches today, right? We're going out to the ship. So some of you will be getting a call sign, right? I'm sure there's going to be some chaos. Some of you will not be. You are aiming to not be in the call sign given group there. So today, we do have a little bit more than just coming back to the ship, although that is going to be kind of the main point of our lecture, right? Or not lecture, but practical today. Um, we're going to be learning how to use the harpoon, and then we'll be teaching the Marshall stack, comms, the overhead brake at the boat, and then kind of what you're looking for when you're flying in to grab a wire. With that being said, it's going to be a fairly, uh, I want to say brief day, just in the sense that our lesson plans pretty much going to be fly off the boat, pickle off those harpoons, and then turn back to go land. So today, the only keybinds that we really need to have are our trim hat and our sensor control switch. At this point, we really should have these things bound, but just kind of highlighting that again. Nice to have Hornet ball just to talk to the AI. I don't even have that bound. These are just nice to have, right? These are just suggestions here. Do not necessarily need those things. So we are going to obviously be flying a case one departure today, which we kind of first implemented last week. Does anyone have any questions from our first actual like application and flying of the case one? Did it feel kind of weird for anybody? Cool. So I'm going to assume that we're pretty good on the case one, but quick refresher, right? Launch off that catapult. Remember those catapults 1 through 4. Uh, Smaller number will be off to the starboard side. Larger will be off to the port side, right? Port for left. Both have 4 letters. If you launch off of 1 or 2, you're taking a right hand clearing turn. If you're launching off of 3 and 4, you're taking a left hand clearing turn. You'll bank your jet to 30 degrees, wing down to port or starboard. From there, you'll fly about 1 mile, and then you'll turn back to the BRC of that ship, which is a heading, right? The BRC is just the heading that that boat is steaming on. From there, you'll be flying your entire case one departure at 500 feet at 300 knots indicated. That is pretty important just to be able to monitor the pattern, right? And it's going to become pretty important for the pattern work. I already mentioned that last week why we care about the altitudes and the speed. And then when we actually go out to recover, it'll make more sense of why we need to be at 500, right? If you're doing the overhead brake, you'll be at 800 feet. And if you are marshaling, you're going to be at 2000 or higher. So you're going to start to see kind of those like layer cakes of airspace unfolding in the actual server. And then that'll really make it click why you need to stay at 500 feet as I snap because I'm talking with my hands. 7 miles DME here is going to be the distance that we need to fly 500, 300. And then from there, you are just clear to fly however you would like to do, however you do so, whatever your flight plan is for that day. If you didn't know, DME just stands for distance measuring equipment. So it is literally just your TACAN. But we already knew that, just giving you a bit more info on DME. And some more recap as well. Our trimming stuff here. Remember to trim out your jet for nose trim when you are taking off from the carrier. With that being said, this is going to be the biggest addition to our workflow for coming back to the ship. This is the communication phase. This is really the flying around the ship part is difficult. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, right? It can be pretty tricky, but it's pretty easy to start to get um, muscle memory will start to build up and you'll be good to go. With that being said, though, the inbound comms are going to be pretty clunky at to start off. Breaking this down a little bit, right? There are two main zones of control around an aircraft carrier, right? You have your 10-mile zone and you have your 50-mile zone. So the first time that you'll be contacting the carrier will be once you pop that 50-mile zone kind of invisible bubble. Does that make sense to everybody? So when your TACAN says 50 miles out, you'll be looking to contact whatever carrier you're operating off of. Cool. With that being said, what do you say to them? Well, you'll say this kind of text right here. You'll say Union Marshal 201 marking moms for 09050 Angels 20, State 7. So let's break that call down a little bit. This is you just telling Union Marshal who you are, where you are, and how much gas you have. Breaking that down a little bit, right? Union Marshal is going to be Abraham Lincoln's Marshal, so CVN 72. 201 here is the Modex number of the jet that's calling. So you'd say whatever your Modex is if you're making that call alone. Marking moms for 090. So basically, you're saying if you look on heading 090, if I'm on the ship and I look on heading 090, you'll see the direction we're coming from, right? So it's the reciprocal of the heading that you're flying on, right? So right now, these two jets, the section of F-18s here, are flying on heading 270. You would tell marking moms the reciprocal of that heading because they're looking the opposite way to see where you guys are coming from. Does that make sense?
I think it makes sense, but I don't think your drawing is right. It says the
Uh,
BRC is heading north, so it's opposite.
well, right. In this situation, they're flying in from the side. But regardless of that, the accuracy is not necessarily super duper critical. It's more so just like the the visual demonstration of the reciprocal kind of concept. With that being said, you do have a trick to do to get this number without doing math, um, and I'll point that out to you guys since we're actually in the cockpit. You'll look inside the HSI and you'll see what's called like a little grain of rice on the other end of your TACAN kind of T. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I will tell you guys about that. We're actually in the cockpit. Now, with that being said, moving on a little bit, 50 is telling you that you're telling Marshall here that you're 50 miles away from the carrier. Angels 20, right? We're at 20,000 feet. And then the state is telling you how much gas you currently have. What's important to note is that you're reporting your lowest state. So you're not saying your own flight lead state. You're saying whoever has the smallest amount of fuel in a flight if you are flight leading. With that being said, if you're flying alone, you will just give them your fuel. From there, the actual carrier will tell you this line of readback. 201, Union Marshal, loud and clear, radar contact, case 1 recovery expected, mother's altimeter 2992, BRC, route right. I'm not going to keep talking, but this is just them giving you standard readback, just like, standard operating procedure for any air traffic control. What's important to note is that this is when the AI will tell you what recovery you're expecting, right? Because there's cases 1, 2, and 3. We're only going to talk about case 1 for our course at large here. So this is when they would tell you how you're going to be recovering to the ship. They'll tell you your altimeter. They'll tell you the BRC. This is the other big one here, right? It's going to tell us what we need to set our course line to be able to start flying our geometry to be able to recover at the ship. Marshall Angels 2. This is also really important. This is telling you where to establish yourself in the overhead pattern, and then telling you just simply to report seeing me at 10, right? And we'll talk about seeing you at 10 a little bit later on. So it's going to give you that read back, and they're going to tell you basically what to do. Right? They're giving you instructions. From there, you'll just give them your read back, right? 201 altimeter 292 BRC 180, right? All that good stuff there. That read back. From there, comms are going to go completely silent until see you at 10, right? So that see you at 10 call means that you can visibly see the carrier within that 10-mile zone, right? So the reason that call is important is one, you're updating your location, right? Is telling everyone that you are now within 10 miles of the carrier. And it's another opportunity to update your fuel state, right? So now you're saying your new fuel state, right? State 6.4 as opposed to 7.0, right? You've burned 600 pounds of gas. And then you're also kind of confirming the case 1 conditions, right? Because case 1 conditions, you need to have at minimum 10 miles of visibility. So by seeing the carrier out at 10 miles, like see you at 10, literally, you literally visibly see the carrier. You are just affirming their choice and decision of having case 1 conditions. Does that make sense? And you can literally give that call at whatever distance as long as you see it. So basically, you would give this call in real life whenever you actually see the carrier. So it could be see you at 15, see you at 17, or see you at 9, right? Whenever you visibly see that carrier, you give them that number. From there, Marshall's going to switch you into tower, right? So from Marshall to tower is going to be your kind of in close sort of control frequency. So that's a lot here, but don't sweat it. Flight leads will take care of it for the first time around. Just focus on absorbing that information. If you don't understand something that somebody says, just make sure to ask a question. Right? There's no questions. And then if you want to give the call than just ask or be voluntold or whatever, and you can try to give out this call. For me personally, I always just flew with a cheat sheet open on my second monitor or on my iPad or whatever until I got this down. Yeah, that is the basics here of the first phase of checking in and communications. Now, this is going to be the second phase of a case one pattern, as well as the third stage. But we're going to talk about the second stage first here, and that is going to be the Marshall stack. So I already mentioned that term Marshall stack. That is basically the way that a carrier can kind of control the landing queue, right? So think about it this way: if we have a really complex multi-component strike that we launched out with, let's say, I don't know, 12 F-18s, a few E2s. You guys get the idea, right? A bunch of naval aircraft we launched off our carrier. That means they all need to come back and land on that carrier, right? How do we keep them in a line effectively? Well, that line is the Marshall stack. So the Marshall stack is basically just stepping in line to check out at the grocery store or whatever. Now, the Marshall stack works um, by having a big racetrack pattern above the aircraft carrier. Okay. And with that being said, we can take into account and kind of notice the carrier right here. The position of the carrier will be offset to the right of the racetrack pattern of the Marshall stack. A few kind of key takeaways, though. You'll notice that we have kind of four main positions. Right, position one here, as labeled on the ship here on the carrier. Position two, like true north here, but to the left and above the carrier. Position three, completely a beam to the carrier, right? And then position four is going to be down to the left of that boat. You'll also notice that there's a left-hand track. So just to kind of say that verbally, it is a left-hand racetrack always, just like how a overhead brake pattern is always going to be to the left. All of our patterns are going to be to the left here. So those are kind of the very basic details of the Marshall stack here. Those four positions are important to know. So make sure that you're paying attention to those numbers here: position 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now the reasons for that being, I'll talk about in a little bit, but those positions do in fact matter. Now the actual diameter of the entire stack should be about 5 nautical miles. Okay. So when you're rolling out here onto position 3, your DME from the ship should be at about 5 on your C sail on your HSI. Okay. So it's about a 5 nautical mile diameter on your Marshall stack position. What's also important to note is that the Marshall stack follows the boat. So instead of being this perfect circle that we're currently looking at here in the presentation slide, it'll more likely look like an oblong, right? Because you're starting to stretch out the top to follow where the ship is steaming, right? So it won't be this perfect circle all the time. There is potential for it to start stretching out because you are following the ship. The other thing here, we are flying at 250 knots whenever we are in the Marshall stack. Now, the reason for that being, like I kind of already gave that example with having a bunch of jets in that pattern or a bunch of aircraft, right? Because you can have whatever, C2s, whatever. Um, you don't necessarily know how long it'll take to land. It could take hours, depending on the sortie that you're flying on in real life. Obviously, in DCS, that's not as big of a concern, right? The longest I've ever waited in a stack for was like 20 minutes. Not a big deal, right? Just take a TikTok, scroll, get a few Instagram reels in, we're good. But that's why we fly at 250 knots. It's just our sustained altitude or speed, pardon me. We're just trying to keep our gas okay and at a safe level to be able to keep staying in that stack and safely recover and have a few attempts around the back of that ship. I'm kind of holding off on this a little bit, but now we can talk about the different layers of a Marshall stack. So I want you to think of a Marshall stack kind of like a layer cake, right? Each layer of that layer cake can hold a certain amount of aircraft. It depends. The number is kind of a squadron SOP thing, so it depends on the group you're flying with, slash, kind of what, how many people are in each flight. I think in real life the number is 16 jets per stack, like layer. And what I mean by layer here is altitude patterns, right? So uh, the lowest you can be in the Marshall stack will be 2,000 feet, right? So think of that the air above the carrier, right? Think of as 800 altitude and below area as the space for jets to go land, right? They're going to enter the overhead brake and come down to the downwind and land. You're going to be at 2,000 feet or higher if you're marshaling, right? So if you're underneath 2,000 feet, you're going to be yelled at So make sure that you are flying at 2,000 feet or higher. 2,000 feet will be the base layer of that cake, if we're going with that analogy still. So if there's no one in the stack, you'll be told to marshal at Angels 2. Now, if that layer is full, right, you're at, and there's too many jets in that first 2,000-foot layer, you will be kicked up 1,000 feet into a 3,000-foot layer. And then if that 3,000-foot layer is full, you'll be kicked up into a 4,000-foot layer. Okay. So each layer from 2K will be an increment of 1,000 feet. Right. So 3,000, here's 4,000. And each of those layers are holding a certain amount of aircraft. So kind of harkening back here to the position of the Marshall stack, that is why positions are so crucial, right? Because you have to be at different altitudes depending, and you have to be in different kind of positions at the stack to change your altitude. So, for example, right, if I am showing up to the stack and I need to be at 3,000 feet, well, that's a problem, right? Because I don't want to join at the wrong altitude. So what happens is there's two positions where you can ascend and join or kind of go up a layer of altitude, right, to the next layer of the stack. And there's two positions where you can go down layers of the stack. Okay. So between positions 1 and 3 here, so this kind of top half of the circle, you can go up. Right. So for example, if I'm entering the Marshall stack, I'm going to enter at 2,000 feet. If I'm supposed to go up to 3,000, I'm going to, and if I join here at position 4, I'm going to stay at 2,000 until I get past position 1 here. And then I'll start climbing on up to 3,000. And then I'll just maintain 3,000 until I need to descend again, right? Because obviously I have to go through that layer again to be able to come land. I would wait till I'm between positions 3 and 1, so that bottom half of that Marshall stack, to go back down to position, or pardon me, 2,000 feet. With that being said here, guys, make sure that you are in the Marshall stack with your uh, landing hook here down, right? Um, your landing hook should be down by the 50-mile mark. So once you're making that initial call, generally speaking, part of your scan should be dropping your tail hook. So cool. How do I actually kind of leave the um, Marshall stack here and enter the overhead brake pattern that we're familiar with at this point? Well, you'll be given a call from tower, and that call signal is Charlie. And what that means is your signal is to commence. Right. So commencement is the way that you leave the Marshall stack and enter the initial for the overhead brake landing. Now you'll see there's an orange line out here that turns into a red line that turns into the overhead brake pattern, right? And this is when you would commence. So this is another reason why the positions of a Marshall stack are important to know, because you need to know the numbers, because you will always commence at position 3. So once you enter the beam position here on position 3, you will commence. Now, what you do is you will just kick out to the left here. You will, if you kind of look at it here, you'll take the BRC and then you'll go 120 degrees off of that BRC, kind of negative. You have to do a little bit of math. Normally, to be honest with you, I just kind of eyeball it because I've done this a million times, so I'm tired of doing math. But you'll kick out to the left here, and you'll keep flying out to the left until at the apex of your kind of kick out from the stack, you're at 7 miles DME from the ship. So you'll keep going here, coming out to the left, and you'll be accelerating and coming down from position 3, to be clear. So, for example, you'll be at 2,000 feet here at position 3. Your signal is Charlie. And then from there, you will start accelerating, right? Hitting 350 in the box to perform an overhead brake, and then coming down from 2,000 feet to 800 feet, right? We're just trying to get to our parameters for overhead brake. And right here, you'll see that labeled, right? By the time you're here at the 5 mile initial, or 3 mile initial, pardon me, you'll want to be at 350 in the box at 800 feet. So once it's 7 miles DME here, you'll go ahead and start turning in to slot back into where you will fly your overhead, right, for your initial. And then the initial should just feel standard. That is just the initial that we always fly at the airfield or at the carrier. An important thing to note, the actual math thing, right? I said I don't like to do the math. Uh, at position 3, right, you'll take a 30-degree offset of the reciprocal of that BRC. So whatever the reciprocal is of 270 plus 30, right? So the reciprocal of 270 in this example is 90 plus 30 is 120, right? So you'll commence on that heading. And then once it says 7 miles DME, you'll turn into the left. With that being said, right, there's nothing to it but to do it. You'll just fly that overhead brake pattern. And you'll have this kind of minor calm state once you are in the stack. I know it's a lot of information, guys, so I'm sorry about that. But this is what you'll see after you switch to tower, right? So the last slide we're talking about switching to tower. This is kind of what you will. The conversation continues on tower, right? So you'll say you need Marshall 301, whatever, checking in. They'll tell you they can hear you. From there, you'll tell you that you will tell them that you're established in the Marshall stack, right? So you're overhead Angels 2, right? So you're saying I'm in the stack and I'm at my altitude. Then it'll be quiet until I tell you that your signal is Charlie, which is what
Question.
we were. Yep,
Uh, if I mean, this is assuming everybody's a single ship, right? So if you're if you're formed on a lead, then the lead's doing all the communication.
that is correct. Yep. So if you're flying with me, I would talk for you, and the way that I would do that, I was going to save this for a bit later, but I'll bring it up now, just to kind of fully answer your question. You see how like the Modex numbers here. All right, you'll say Union Marshal 201, for example. If I was actually leading with a group of guys instead of this example, which is correct, right? We're one ship at the moment. I would say 201 holding hands with 397, and just say whatever Modex numbers of the jets of the flight that I'm in. So you would address tower as your flight with the guys with their numbers. So you say holding hands with blah blah blah, all the numbers from there. But you're correct in this example. This is just a one ship, and if you're a kind of a single ship there, you would just say all this yourself. So cool. I think that I covered everything. The last thing that's important to note is that you need to be careful about when you commence. Right, if your signal is Charlie, you can only commence from position 3. What that means is if you get your signal as Charlie right past position 3, like where this kind of arrow is, for example, you would need to wait an entire rotation to hit position 3 again. That's just for safety, as well as to kind of preserve the geometry of the intercept to turn back into the initial for the overhead brake. There's a lot of information. So, are there any questions on that? Does that make sense to everybody? Cool. And the cool thing about this is you'll need to know it if you're flying alone, but your flight lead will have to do all of this on his own. So, um, for today's purposes, just watch what we do as a flight lead, as flight leads. But all you have to worry about is flying formation. Alrighty. So, welcome to the overhead brake. Right, this is the final phase of the actual carrier landing, and this is going to be what is familiar to you guys. We've been building up to this the entire time that we have been doing our course. And this is just the standard overhead brake that we have flown a trillion times at this point. What's important to note, though, is that at the field, generally speaking, will come in a little bit high, and that's just for terrain avoidance. Here, you need to really be on your numbers. So you'll be at 350 at 800 feet. I'm not going to go super duper crazy on this slide just because a lot of this is, review. But a few kind of tips for you. Uh, Call in the break on the radio when you're in the break. Um, that's just to tell everybody that you're in the break. From there, aim for your 1.2 miles of beam downwind. Make sure you're trimmed up. And then once you see the back of the carrier, that white line, otherwise known as the round down, that is kind of your reference point for our turn in for the ship. Right. So at the airfield, it's the end of that carrier. Or pardon me, at the airfield, it's the end of the airfield, right? No duh. For the carrier, it's the end of the carrier. So in this picture, right, you'll see that little white strip of lines once you're, or that white strip of one line. Once the tip of your wing flies past that, turn in 30 degrees, left angle of bank down, and then you will be good to start intercepting the back of the pattern there for your final approach. Any questions? Any questions or comments or concerns? Cool. Put your flight path marker or your velocity vector on the crotch of the ship, right? So You kind of want to aim it just like this in the side picture. Remember, this velocity vector is where your jet's going to be going. So you want to aim it for this point. And that's just to be able to grab a wire. And then the last piece of advice that I have for you guys is that I already mentioned, but make sure that you just trust the meatball. The meatball is going to bring you down into those wires. So even if you feel like you're going to float and go long, as long as you're trusting the meatball and keeping this meatball here right in the flaws in the center of those two kind of green arrays there, you will be good to go. Remember, we're trying to keep our altitude at 800 throughout the actual brake turn. You're pulling 1% of your G or your speed as G when you're coming across the actual brake. You'll be getting dirtied up configuring in that actual turn. From there, once you come out into your downwind leg here, you'll want to be at 1.2 nautical miles of a beam distance from the carrier. That's just to set yourself up for the best possible final when you turn in. And then you'll
About
start
1.2,
descending down
1.5.
to, yep, you want to start coming down to 600 feet on the downwind as well. So you'll actually start to descend here in the downwind, and then you will start to come across once your wingtip here passes the end of the round down of that ship. Generally speaking, you want to be around 500 to 450 feet above the ocean once you're coming across the lake of that carrier. And then from there, you're just flying your final approach. Your scan is meatball lineup AOA, right? So you're just checking where your meatball's at. You're checking where your lineup is in the landing area, and then you're checking that you're on speed. So just repeat those three words to yourself over and over, and then just trust your hands, and you got it. I believe in you guys. Another kind of comment is the final approach area is called the groove, right? You're coming into land. And you generally speaking do not want to be long in the groove. That's really crucial because if you are long in the groove, the way that you get long in the groove is by taking it a late beam turn, right? So that a beam turn is when you see the end of the round down and you turn left to be able to kind of come into your final approach into that groove that we just talked about, right? Now you don't want to turn late because that will uh, affect the timing of every jet in that pattern. Right, so for example, here, if this jet here is taking a long um, a beam turn, right? That means that he was long in the downwind, meaning that the next jet is going to have to keep going down that downwind, and it's just going to keep stretching that pattern out farther and farther. So, to the best of your ability, try to turn once your wingtip passes the round down of that carrier, just to really, really kind of keep that pattern condensed and tight, and then we're not having any fuel emergencies and kind of crazy shenanigans happening. I just had to get into touch with the Air Force stuff there. I feel a little bit nasty, guys. I'm sorry. Anyways, um, this is another concept here that's unique to naval aviation. That is red deck and green deck, right? So basically, these are calls that the pilot in the wires will give, red deck or green deck on the frequency that you're landing on. So red deck, you'll call that once you're in the wires. And what you're communicating to everyone on the channel is that that deck is not able to accept a landing airplane, right? That's why it's your red deck. There's someone in the landing area. Once you cross that foul line, it will be a green deck. Now that foul line is that red and white dashed line on the actual carrier. So it's basically just once you're out of the landing area, it's a green deck. So that is what that means. Call green deck once you are out of the landing area slash across that foul line. So right here's that green area, right? This is where it's safe to be. This red area, right? All of this, if your jet is in that area, that is a red deck. Kind of continuing here, there's going to be a little bit more information on the how to manage the pattern, uh, right? A bolter and spin, those are just ways for a controller to manage the airspace above the ship, right? So the spin pattern, if you're told to spin it, it means that they want you to return back to your 3 mile initial. So you're probably not going to hear that anytime soon. But if you're told to spin it, they want you to come all the way back to your 3 mile initial point. That's just to declutter the airspace from the controller side. Generally speaking, LSOs and controllers are the same dude, so it can get pretty hectic. So if he gives you instructions, please, as an LSO, please listen to them. Fly Delta or Fly Delta Easy. That's just another way for an LSO or controller to manage traffic in the pattern when intervals are too small. So if you're told to fly Delta or Fly Delta Easy, you're just going to immediately enter that bolter pattern. Right. So we haven't necessarily talked about the bolter pattern, but we will cover that right now. The bolter pattern is what happens when you are unable to grab a wire on that ship. Okay. So basically, what you'll do is if you touch the deck uh, and you do not grab a wire, you will keep your throttles up, which is why you keep your power set when you are, even in a wire. Climb to 600 feet MSL, turn back to the BRC, right? So you're kind of flying straight and level on the BRC there, and then turn back into your downwind unless told otherwise by a controller. So that's the bolter pattern is, and we will get a few bolters today, probably from an instructor as well. I'm betting on Talthis for a bolter. Um, so we'll have to see if that makes me money or not, that bet. LSO is short for landing signal officer. That is a pretty crucial part of naval aviation. It's kind of, they call them angels in white there on the deck because they will help guys get down onto the carrier. In supercarrier, you are armed with something known as the platcam. That is going to be your main tool in helping to wave guys down. So waving is just the general term for giving guys LSO comms. Um, this is your platcam right here. There's a green kind of screen, and it's giving you a lot of information. Now, these crosshairs here are your reference for the center line of the runway as well as their wing level. So this isn't necessarily telling you to maneuver the jet into the space between the crosshair. It is just a static reference for you to be able to judge what the pilot in the groove is doing with their jet. Now, breaking down the info here on the platcam, there's a lot of info. It'll tell you the type of jet that is in the groove. It'll tell you the actual carrier you're on, as well as your current like BRC. Right, so it tells you right here 116 that is currently your BRC. It'll tell you that you're on right 71, which is Teddy Roosevelt. Date time. It'll tell you the heading that the jet is on, or pardon the airspeed that the jet is on, as well as the elevation. And then if it is working, it'll show you the queue for jets that are coming into land. So right now, for example, 301 is currently in the groove, and then 305 is next up. So that would be me and then Taltis, coincidentally, coming into land. You can pretty much ignore the hook to ramp angle indicators here. Generally speaking, they're not super duper helpful for our purposes. So you pretty much just want to keep an eye on the jet in this plat cam and try to make sure that they're not flying super crazy. Now that is just breaking down the plat cam as a tool, right? You also need to make sure that you are looking at that jet with your eyes and talking to them with your words. And kind of talking about that, I'm sure you guys have all heard it, right? But there are LSO comms that you will give. The first kind of thing to note is that your inflection and how you deliver the word is crucial, right? So a power call is different from like a power call, right? Like the way that you deliver that word does affect the pilot. So keep that in mind, right? If if V is starting to get a little bit low in glide slope, I'm not going to tell him power because he's going to think that he's not going to need as much power as he does, right? So make sure that you're keeping that in mind, right? The way that you deliver the words do matter. Now, that being said, covering the words, you're going to have kind of four main calls that you would give a pilot in the groove. You have your lineup calls, and then you have your glide slope calls. Now, your glide slope calls here are a little bit simpler. They're either just your high or power, right? So, power is just telling you that you need to come up on that glide slope. You're a little bit low. You need a little bit more throttle, right? Your high means that you're too high on that glide slope, meaning that you need to take that throttle back and take a little bit of that throttle out. Okay. Um, the lineup calls are a bit more complicated, but they are going to be helpful for obviously the lineup of the jet. So you'll have two main comms for your lineup. You'll have come left and right for lineup. Now, breaking that down a little bit, right? Come left means that they need to come to their left, but on the plat cam, it'll be your right. So keep it in mind that from your perspective, it's going to be inverted, right? So if you tell them to come left from your view, it's going to look like they're coming to the right. Right for lineup is going to be your left hand perspective. Now, the last thing that's really important to know about the calls here is that you can only give a come left call and a right for lineup call. The reason for that being, if the transition clips and the pilot in the groove only hears come or right, um, they understand where to go. Right? If it was come right and come left, and it clips and you hear come, you don't know where to. Come on, man. You don't know. You are a professional pilot and an adult. Come on, man. Keep it together.
I'm sorry.
Admittedly, it's pretty funny. I was kind of smiling a little bit. Anyways, guys, come on. So come left, right? If it was come for both, then and it clipped, then you wouldn't know what direction to go to. You'd be confused. So if you hear come and then nothing after that, right? Come to your left, right? And then right for lineup means that you need to come to your right. Okay. So that's kind of the basics here. I actually do offer a full, more kind of higher fidelity LSO course that V here is planning on hosting when he can. So yeah, that's what the CAG paddles means in my Discord bio. It just means that I run the kind of the air ops side of our boat stuff. So that's kind of a breakdown of LSO calls there, because these two guys want me to do that. So this is a pilot view of the LSO kind of helping you on down, right? So seeing that from your perspective, right? Come left, you need to come to your left. Come right, or right, pardon me, right for lineup, you need to come to your right. Power / don't sync calls, right? You need to throttle forward and start coming up. And then your high means that you're too high, meaning that you need to come down. What's important to note is that there is a delay in thrust, right? So keep that in mind. You want to be thinking ahead of the jet. You don't want to fall behind that aircraft when you are flying behind the ship. That's when things start to get a little bit dicey. And yeah, that is kind of your perspective when you're flying on in, right? Come left, you'll need to come to your left. Right for lineup means that it doesn't mean that you're on. It means you need to come to your right. Once you
Hey, real
trap,
quick question, bro. What was floating?
so floating just means that you are kind of. It's hard to explain. It's kind of like intuitive. Um, it means that you're not coming down, right? So if you're floating over the wires, it means that you are not. Your descent rate is not high enough to be able to impact the ground. So you're kind of going long in the landing area.
Is that because your AOA is too high?
It could be for whatever reason. Your AOA could
Oh,
be too high. It could be too low. Basically, it means that you're not on the numbers.
oh.
So if you're floating, it can mean that you have too much power, or you have the biggest time that you'll notice that your jet is floating is when you're really, really low on gas. So the F-18 gets insanely floaty when you don't have a lot of gas in the tank. So it'll actually get really hard to land it. So you'll just want to kind of get ahead of that and expect that, and just
So,
fly with a
so
little bit like less throttle.
it's a physical thing with the airplane itself.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
It's
Cool.
it's like the state of you not being able to come down when you want to.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Got it. Too much lift.
Yeah. Basically think of like imagine like the touchdown zones on the airfield.
Mhm.
Imagine if you just kept you're a Viper guy, right?
Yes.
Basically just imagine landing long. Right? You're not touching the touchdown zone. You're floating, your aero brake is a little bit long.
Yeah. You can't get it down. Yeah.
Cool.
Sorry, we were communicating on SRS. Yeah, we're coming in. I'm setting up for a 10-mile here, 10-mile initial. I'll check in at 10 miles. We're going to go ahead and speed up now to 350 knots for the break and descend down 800 feet over the carrier. I'm going to be at 1 mile abeam to the right of the ship when you are coming in for your break.
Now keep in mind here, they're kind of omitting the Marshall stack. That's just to save some time so we can go get flying. If you were coming in to enter the Marshall stack, you would not be flying this way.
Coming right, flight. And expert flight 1 final landing checks, please advise. Rolling out. Abe Marshall 310 expert flight 1 holding hands with 305 and 3 unknown inbound left overhead break.
Do carrier checks complete.
All right, LSO better get on the platform.
Bag, are you flying with any kind of autopilot, or is that just your control of
No,
your
that's
hand?
just me.
Fucking hey, dude.
All right, we're leveling out at 800 flight.
2. 3.
Little low, correcting. All right, next comm from the lead is going to be see you at 3 mile initial. And that's going to let the tower know we're at 3 miles from the break. Also, flight 10-second interval breaks.
2.
Coming right just a little.
Also, it is not expected to be anywhere this close in form. Just having a bit of
Rolling
fun.
out.
They don't get
Yeah.
spotted often.
Rolled out. All right, I'll see you guys on deck. All right, coming in for the break. Here, I'll put my control inputs on the left. 310 in the break. And my game froze. Hello? Okay, there we go. All
Your jet just went mental.
right, left-hand overhead brake. So now I'm going to drop down to 600 feet while slowing down, trying to get below 250 so I can deploy my gear in flaps.
You guys are on 28.5, right?
30.
Yeah.
305.
But I'm going to just do the comms in here. All right, below 250, gear and flaps coming down. And trying to maintain that 600.
So just so you guys know here, I am streaming the LSO view, just to kind of show you guys what it looks like outside of the cockpit for these patterns here.
All right, I'm 1.4 from the ship. About to be a beam soon. I'm between 1.2 and 1.5, so I'm perfectly set up. Little low, correcting for it with power and trim. And once I'm a beam, I'll let the LSO, I'll give a call to the LSO in the voice chat, and he should reply. 210, a beam.
310, battles contact. So from here, the comms would be quiet unless the LSO, who is myself in this example, needs to tell the pilot something, or if he's going to call the ball, which will happen a little bit on. I didn't even mention calling the ball for the brief. Once you're at 3/4 of a mile out, you'll just call that ball. And what you're saying is that you see the meatball on the iflaws here. So the big array out there. You're just telling the LSO that you can visibly see that in your vision. So right now here comes V around the beam
210, Hornet ball, 4.9.
310. What? 310. Roger ball.
305 will need to wave off.
So you'll notice that V is just riding that meatball on down. He's trusting that meatball. And then now this is an example of a red deck. So he would call out red deck on that radio. Red deck, red deck, red deck. So today we're going to be kind of covering rudimentary air to ground radar stuff. Generally speaking, the air to ground radar is a bit of a nightmare to work in the F-18. It's pretty helpful with some certain aspects. Honestly speaking, I very rarely use it. Once I normally just pick my targeting pod and a cleverly selected waypoint. However, we're going to be using that air to ground radar today, and you will just activate that on your right DDI by pressing that air to ground master mode. We're going to be using the C radar today mode. So what the C radar is just kind of skimming the top of the ocean, looking for contacts, which will be a boat or a oil rig or whatever would be on the ocean. Hopefully it's not a whale. That would be unfortunate to send a harpoon at. Now, with that being said, to change that mode, there'll be that top left button right here on that DDI. You'll click it until it says C. So we have 4 main modes: map, GMT, C, and TA. You'll just press that button until it says C right here in the top left corner. XP 1, 2, and 3 are basically telling the jet what fidelity of radar you want. So you don't really need to worry about these too much today. But if you're trying to get like a very, very precise sight picture with your radar, you would want to fiddle with these buttons. ECCM is not implemented. This would turn the radar to air to ground or air mode, pardon me. Right here, this is the indicator of your radar elevation, right? So if you want to bring your radar up or down on that horizon, kind of think of it as a beam of flashlight, right? If you want to move that beam down or up, this is kind of the position indicator of where that beam is being pointed. And then right here, you're telling you how much azimuth you're currently covering, right? So right now is 120 degrees of radar signal that you're sending out the nose of your jet. Cool. Lastly, right here, we have our scale reference, right? So now we're looking at 40 miles out. If you wanted to change it, you would press these two buttons like we have with other systems, whether it's our HSI page or targeting pod or whatever. And then if you want to click freeze, it would freeze what you're seeing on your radar page. Lastly, the kind of last important buttons that we need to worry about um, are radar beams type, right? So fan and pencil, right? So pen, you're setting out a much more narrow beam. You would generally want to use that if you're trying to like get a better sight picture of an object. And then fan is going to be a wider, more general acquisition kind of radar signal out there. Lastly, reset and silent. You'd only press this to turn off that radar. So if you're trying to be kind of stealthy, you'll click that silent mode. You're not going to press that generally. And then reset is just going to turn the radar settings back to how they were once you took off with that jet. So we're going to be using the R/BL mode for the Harpoon today. That is going to be the radar mode. To do so, it'll be quite simple. We're going to go into our air to ground master mode, right? Like same as before. We're going to go to our stores page. And then from there, we will go ahead and select the mode that is operational for our harpoons today, which harpoons, just to be a little more specific, right? I'm kind of working on the assumption that we know what a harpoon is. A harpoon is a long range cruise missile that is oriented towards striking surface targets on that ocean surface. So, put it simply, it's a cruise missile to blow up boats. RBL mode is just a radar mode. We're using the radar of your own jet and of the missile to be able to shoot down a contact with your radar. Now, we have to select that mode by going to stores. We'll select Harpoon, then we'll select R/BL mode. It'll display at the top of that DDI page. From there, you can change your flight plan, where you're telling it what flight level to fly at, whether it's low, medium, or high. We have those three options. And then it'll ask you for your terminal mode. Now, terminal is telling the missile how you want it to attack once it's at its target, whether it is a pop attack or kind of straight at the water line of that ship. Now, either mode or either way is effective. It just depends on what kind of attack you're going for. Popping will literally have the missile pop off the surface of the water, come up, and then come down over the top onto the top of that ship. And if you have it set to skim, it's just going to stay on that water and then hit the water line of the ship, like I previously mentioned. Now, to actually get your targeting info, you'll want to look at your kind of air-to-ground radar screen, which will be depicted right here, right? And like I mentioned, we'll press that top left button here until it says C, which it does in the sight picture. Once you soy over to it, right, just standard operating procedure at this point with the F-18 guys, right? You will be able to slew around your throttle designated controller and maneuver these two vertical yellow bars. You'll put those two vertical yellow bars on whatever you want to lock up. And then from there, you will go ahead and soy into the direction of your DDI to grab a acquisition of that target with your radar, right? So if it's on your right DDI, like it is an example, you'll soy over to the right and you'll grab a track and you'll see that right here, right? So there's that track on that radar. And you can see that it's telling you that it is tracked as well as kind of the bearing of that target. Now, it's important to note is the way that our radar works, you do not want to fly head on to that target, right? You'll want to fly a little bit offset to the left or the right, just to make sure that you are maintaining a really high quality radar lock. This is an air to ground radar thing. It just doesn't really play nicely if you fly at it head on. So just maintain a little bit of separation to the left or the right to be able to really have an awesome radar lock for an air-to-ground target in this example. From there, you'll just simply hit that pickle button, and that harpoon is going to fly off your jet, and it will go and track. There's probably a really high likelihood that we are going to have a fratricide incident today. Generally speaking, we will shoot down a few enemy ships. Not a big deal, or pardon me, not enemy, friendly ships. Not a big deal as long as we're getting the idea for this. Then we are doing a good job. Lastly, if you really wanted to kind of see what you're shooting at, if you have your targeting pod, you can your targeting pod will automatically, pardon me, I'm struggling here, guys, will slew onto the thing that you've locked up with your air to ground radar. So you can get your VID there and see your visual indication and see if you're going to shoot down your friend or your foe. we're going to skip BOL mode today. It's a little complicated. We don't necessarily need to use this. And yeah, that's pretty much the basics of our flight.
Okay, so let's waypoint designate the shipping waypoint. Let's go ahead and bring up air to ground stuff. And I'm about 24 miles to your 320. Which is no big deal. We don't necessarily have to form a flight to do this. You got your air to ground stuff up?
Yeah, I think so. And I have that we're 112 miles from the target range. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, that's about right.
I'll slow down to
So-
300 until you catch up.
I'm good. I'm off to your right, but I'm on target. But okay, so on your left, when you hit air to ground, on your left DDI, your stores page pops up, right?
Yep.
Okay, you're gonna select the Harpoon, which is HPD.
Okay.
And you're gonna have to do this for both of your stations. But your first one, you're gonna click mode. And then you're gonna select RB/L.
And what does that stand for?
Range, bearing, and I forget what the L stands for, but it's basically you select the target with your radar and it goes to that, versus the other one, which is you just send it in a direction toward a waypoint, and then when it gets there, it just selects something that's at that waypoint. It doesn't, it's just whatever's there. It doesn't necessarily look for a specific size of ship. So then you're gonna, below that is FLT, which is flight, which is basically a high, low, or medium flight level, depending on what you want. Mind you, these are like cruise missiles, so they have a really long range, and usually the lower the flight level, the harder they are for enemy radars to see. The next one is term. Yeah, typically. Then the next one after that is term, which is, it should say pop or skim. And that's basically, skim is, it's going to stay at basically water level and strike its target right at the water line. A pop-up attack is at the last second, it's going to pop up high and come down and hit the target from on top. So again, depending on what you want it to do and what your target is, depends on what type of termination profile you want. And the very last one down there, it should say seek. And if you look in the middle of your screen, it says program 1, and it has everything that you've put in so far, and then under seek it should say small, medium, or large, and that's the type of ship it's looking for. So if you hit the seek button, it will alternate between the different size ships you can look for. So it's not going to look for a specific ship necessarily, it's going to look for a specific size of ship.
What size should I pick?
Well, there's one large ship, a couple medium ships, and a couple small ships. I'm going after small, so if you want to hit large, that's fine. And then these basically are ready to go. Now you'll notice if you turn on your master arm, you'll notice we're already in range. But we don't have, but if you look on your right DDI, you should have your ground radar up, is that correct?
I switched it over to my FLIR, but yeah.
That's fine. That's fine. Bring your ground radar up. So you hit the middle bottom button, and it should be like attack radar, the second button from the top on the left side.
Got it.
And at the top button on the left side, it says map, right?
Yep.
So you want to push that until you get to C. I think it's going to go like GMT and something else and then C, but you need SEA for C radar.
Okay, I've got contacts.
Okay, so you'll move your sensor select over there, and just in the middle of those contacts, just target to press to select the target. And then you'll sensor select again to that sensor, and you'll notice your radar changes. Once that changes, your harpoons are now looking over there. And that's how you select targets in RBL mode. And again, you'll notice we're already in range, so we can launch at this point. It's got like a 100-mile range or something.
It's not like locking onto it or anything.
It won't necessarily, but does your radar at the bottom of it say track?
I don't see it.
Okay. Did you TDC depress on the group of ships, like to select it like you would a normal target? Okay. Now once you do that, if it's on your right screen, use your sensor select switch and go to the right again.
Oh, okay.
Now you should see track at the bottom, and your radar looks all different.
Yeah.
Yeah, now your harpoons are looking over there. And you'll notice we're already in range, so we can technically fire. The code name for launching a anti-ship missile is, well, actually any cruise missile, is Bruiser. So if you were to be on the strike channel and you're firing these missiles, you'll say, you know, whatever your call sign is, Expert 1-2 or whatever, Bruiser times however many missiles. That way people know you're firing your payload.
Okay, and is there a way for me to like switch over to my FLIR and identify the target or anything?
You can bring it up on your bottom screen. If you hit the bottom, on the bottom screen, the bottom middle button once, and FLIR show up in the top left, then you can bring up your FLIR on the bottom screen. And then if you want to move your teapot around, you just sensor select down to that screen and you can move it around. But your missiles are not going to go to a specific target necessarily. They're going to go to a specific size target.
Yeah, so how do I determine what size target I'm looking at right now?
Okay. As far as what your harpoon's looking at?
Yeah.
Okay, remember on your harpoon screen over on the left where it says seek? If you're looking for small, it's an SML, medium is MED, and large is LRG. It's the very bottom line on your program.
Yep, so how do I know what size this boat is what I'm asking.
Well, the very middle one, that is going to be a large one. I mean, you can scroll around, you can look around the area, but there's one big one. So. And I forget, there's some stipulations, I'd have to look it up as to what sizes it considers small, medium, and large, like, but I forget what they are necessarily. But basically, if you're assigned a certain ship as a target, they should tell you what size it is to put your seeker on. The only issue comes up is if there's multiple ships of that size. But if you feel you're ready to launch, go ahead and launch. I'm launching my 2 now.
One, two, bruiser.
Expert 1-1 Bruiser. Okay, so we can take a look at these. It's going to take a minute for them to hit. They're not super fast, but they can go a long range because they're basically an air-launched cruise missile. I'm going to go ahead and slow down to 300 knots here. are almost about to hit.
Yep, I'm just watching my missile. Looks like the big target might already be destroyed, so it's tracking on some battleship.
Ferry bot.
No, it hit a carrier. Okay. Cool. Expert 1-2 Bruiser. So I don't have to get the radar select like perfect. I just kind of pick the whole group and it picks the target by size.
Yep.
Yep.
Surprisingly easy.
Not difficult at all. Yeah, I don't know if they told you. Apparently your Modex number is actually 367.
No, they did not tell me. I've been 381 this whole time.
Yeah, it's actually 367, so just keep that in mind. Alright, so we're going to the boat. If you can, form up with me.
Right after the big boom.
Yep. I'm to your about 7 o'clock by about 2,000 feet above you and about 5 miles.
Shack, or whatever the word is for ships.
It's shack. Splash for air targets, shack for ground targets. But you have to hit your nose wheel steering button to undesignate your waypoint. And then go ahead and take yourself off here to ground mode, disarm your master arm, turn off your laser, turn off your FLIR. then on your HSI, the top left, it should say TCN for tack hand. If you have that set, you need to select it. If not, I can tell you how to set it. And I got visual on you. But your tack hand should be set for 72 X-ray, and then the next button next to it is ILS. Set that for channel 10 and turn it on also. And on your HSI, select both the tack hand and ILS, which are going to be the top two buttons on the left side. What the ILS does is it creates a crosshair when you're coming in behind the boat to tell you if you're on center line and if you're on glide slope. Also, how much fuel do you got?
3,700.
Okay, you should be good then. Your aircraft weight has to be under 33,000 to land on the boat, and you're set up pretty much the same way I am, so you would need about 4,300 pounds of fuel to hit that goal, so you're good.
I'm at 32.
Yeah, so we figured that out, and we have to dump fuel before we get there. We'll dump fuel, but I don't think we're gonna have to.
What was the ILS channel again?
10. So make sure it's turned on, and then you selected both of those on the HSI. And so we should be in a heading of like 286. That's the direction the boat's going, or toward the boat, I should say. At 50 miles, we will call the boat, tell them we're inbound with our fuel and how high we are and how far out we are, coming from what direction. They will give us the barometer setting, the direction they're traveling, and then from there tell us that we don't need to contact them again until we're 10 miles out. And so what we do, once we get that information, we will descend down to 3,000 feet, and then when we hit 10 miles, we need to be at 250 knots. Because that's the pattern. So 250 knots until we start our initial, and then we'll speed up to 350. Now, if you're by yourself, you need to call in the boat individually, but when we're grouped like this, only one person needs to do it, and it should work fine. So I've already marked you complete for lesson 4, because lesson 4 was taking off the boat and laser guided bombs. Once we land and recover on the boat, you'll have satisfied lesson 5. You ever landed on the boat?
It's been a while. I did it with the 14.
Yeah, I think the 18's a little easier than the 14, so. You know, the whole fly-by-wire thing helps. And the F-14's a big bitch, too. So another thing I like to do on my HSI when I'm landing on the boat is I'll set the scale to 10. Because that is the control zone for the carrier, is 10 miles. And then once we get our VRC, we're going to set our course line for the boat so we get a nice visual reference on our HSI. Do you know how to do that?
Say that last part again.
Do you know how to set the course line on the HSI?
Yeah, I think so.
So with that left and right switch that says CRS right next to your artificial horizon there below the right DDI?
Yep.
Yeah, so you hold it one way or the other, and then whatever BRC they give us, you type that in, and it'll give you a nice line. The good news with that is it also tells you how far you are abeam left or right of that line, so when you do your break and you come around, you'll know, how far to the left or right you are of that line, and you should be anywhere between 1.3 to 1.5 miles abeam. Also, when we call into the boat at 50 miles, we'll go ahead and drop our hooks then. And typically, flights will look at each other and be like, okay, you got a good hook, you got a good hook. I had a guy the other day swear his hook was down, and I didn't tell him it wasn't, and he couldn't figure out why he wasn't snagging the wire. And I was like, are you sure your hook's down? And he had been messing with the hook bypass switch, but not the actual hook lever. It's pretty funny.
Sounds like a call sign.
Oh, it's been put in, don't worry. Put in hooker. Skip might actually work too, though. Alright, we're gonna go ahead and go hooks down, and I'm gonna call the boat.
You've got good hook.
Marshall 309. Marking Moms 114450. Angels
Good
10.
hook also.
State 5.1.
Okay, so they're ready to give us that BRC.
309er, Mother's weather is visibility 10 plus mile. Scattered clouds at above 10,000. Altimeter is 29er. Case 1 recovery expected BRC 109er. Report see me at 10.
Okay, so we set that course line to 109. You'll notice that's facing behind us, so we're coming head on to the boat. And then your barometer is going to be 2993, so your altimeter, the very bottom row of gauges on the right side of your, in the middle is your barometer, and there's that little silver switch you can rotate left or right to get to 2993.
Do I need to call the boat too with the
No, you shouldn't need to. You shouldn't need to. Alright, so I'm going to start to descend, and I'm going to do a slight left so that we're about 3 miles abeam of the course line. We're currently at 1.6. That way when we do our left-hand turn to come behind the boat to set up the pattern, we'll be like basically right on course line. So descending at 5 degrees, going to maintain 300 knots and a slight right. And slight right. I'm heading 2955 degrees. We're going to go wings level at 3,000. Once we hit about 3 miles of beam, I'm going to start turning back left to get to 289, which is going to be the opposite direction of the boat. Speed up a little bit to 300 here. Like I said, once we hit 10 miles, we'll be at 250 knots.
Altitude. Altitude.
And start pull up to go wings level. Alright, we're at 3,300 knots, 3 miles. We're going to come back to the left, get on 289. Wings level. What's your fuel state?
2.6.
Are we cutting it close here? We're only gonna make one loop around and then commence. That way we can save fuel for you. But sometimes if there's a lot of planes in several stacks, you're gonna have to make several loops, so you wanna make sure you got plenty of fuel. So you can always dump fuel. Now there should be an S3 recovery tanker, but I'm gonna begin slowing to 250. I'm at 250. Once we reach 10 miles, I'll call the boat, tell them we'll see you at 10, and they'll just confirm everything's kosher. Typically the marshal will tell you which altitude you need to be at. Typically the lowest is 3,000. They save 2,000 for like prop planes, or if there's a fuel emergency or something. Okay, once we come abeam of the ship, which is going to be currently off our like 10 o'clock, we'll start a 30-degree turn. Hopefully end up right behind the ship and start our racetrack. And once we turn in front of the ship, typically we would stay on the racetrack until we get to the opposite heading, which is 289. But since we're going to commence, we have to add 30 degrees to that, so it'd be 319. That way when we start commencing, we have a little bit wider turn.
Tower
because
309.
we're gonna
Overhead Angels 3. State 4.3.
I forgot to tell them to see you at 10, but
309er. Tower, roger. BRC 109er. signal is Charlie.
Doesn't really matter, I'll do it now.
309. See you at 10.
Got busy talking.
See you at 10.
309er.
There we go.
State switched out.
309. State 4.2.
Okay, we're a beam of the ship. We're gonna start a 30-degree left-hand turn. Now we might need to sharpen this up. That may not have put us wide enough, but we'll see. No, looks like it might turn out okay. Okay, at 109, we're going to go wings level, just to fly past the boat, and then we'll do another left-hand turn once we're past it. Alright, wings level. And another 30-degree left turn. So instead of coming all the way around to 289, which is the reciprocal of the heading, like I said, we need to offset it by 30 degrees to give us more space to make that turn as we accelerate. So we'll stop this rotation at 319, tell them that we're commencing from position 3, and then start our descent to 800 feet and speeding up to 350 knots.
How much do you add to the reciprocal?
So you add 30 degrees. So in this case, 109 is the BRC, the reciprocal is 289. So if you add 30 degrees, that's 319.
Got it.
That way it gives us a little bit
confusing.
of... Yeah, but that way it gives us a little bit of room to make this turn, because as we speed up, it's going to be a wider turn. Alright. 309 commencing position 3. Alright, so we're going to begin a 5-degree descent and start to speed up, and then we're going to make a left-hand turn. We're going to start with 30 degrees. We may have to cut it sharper depending on how it lines up. Alright, here we go. Okay, we're going to start our 30-degree turn here. When we reach 5 miles behind the boat, that's what we call initial. And then I'll brake on the bow, and then 10 seconds later you brake after me.
Fuel low. Fuel low.
When you become a beam of the boat, you call a beam. Going wings level 800 feet here. to come a little sharper. Okay, starting to rotate to be at 109. You should see on your HUD those two things that are going to form that cross.
Yep.
That's your ILS. When they are lined up perfectly and your velocity vectors in the middle and all that, they're perfect.
309 initial.
That'll help you look at your glide slope and all that stuff. And you still have to maintain your AOA while doing all that, but you know, it'll all help. Okay, when you brake, you want to be about 10% of whatever your speed is on your G's, and as you slow down, you're going to slow the pull. But you want to end up 1.3 to 1.5 miles of beam of the boat.
And 600 feet?
800 to 600 feet when you're a beam, yep. 309 in the brake. So go full idle on your throttle when you do this. And if you need to use your speed brake, use your speed brake.
Three at 1 in the brake.
Nine to beam.
Three at 1 at beam.
And you'll call the ball at 3/4 mile.
Hornet ball, 3.1. Red deck. Green deck.
Three at 1 Hornet ball.
You're a little left, but not too bad.
Fuel low. Fuel low.
Congrats, man.
Hey, first try.
Alright. Well, that's pretty much the lessons 4 and 5.
Fuel low. Fuel low.
What were those deck calls you made?
So if you're in the landing area, it's red deck, meaning don't land. And then once you're out of the landing area, green deck, meaning the next person can land.
Green deck.
So, but there you go. Congrats.
Cool, that was fun. Thanks.
Yep, and like I said, I'll be around from noon to, I'll be around till 2, so if anything else you want to do, it's fine.
Think I'm all caught up now.
That looks like.